Stanford University, 1971, where one of the most notorious experiments in modern psychology took place. Professor Philip Zimbardo attempted to study the effects of perceived power between prison guards and prisoners, but really the overarching question was, does the external situation outside of your control dictate your behavior? Or do the intrinsic morals of your being allow you to rise above those negative environments? What happens when you place somebody in a place of power? So college student participants were randomly assigned to be either a prison guard or prisoner. And for the next 14 days, the guards and the prisoners would assume their roles, unsure of the impact that the study would have on their psyche later. The prisoners were made to do push-ups, they were beaten, they were humiliated, and other psychological torture. Guards would do this naturally, or by the instruction from Zimbardo. Yes, the professor, the scientist, actually intervened and instructed the guards to amp up their harshness. So if demand characteristics were a thing, it would be this study. A few days into the study, the prisoner participants would demand to withdraw from the study, but they weren't allowed to. What started off as a study began to muddle into the unknown. Even the professor didn't see what was happening. A study that was supposed to go for 14 days stopped just after 6. And that's only because Zimbardo's wife told them to stop. Fun fact, I ran into Zimbardo in the Stanford restroom before. I didn't talk to him in there or anything. Just 10 years earlier, in 1961, a Yale psychologist named Stanley Milgram conducted another notorious study, what will be known as the Milgram experiment. So he wanted to study to the extent to which people would obey authority. The experimenter would sit in a room with the participant while a fake test subject sat in another room separated by a wall. Now, the fake test subject was someone who was in on a study. The participant was told that they would have to shock the student as they answered quiz questions. Now, the student, or the fake test subject, would pretend to answer quiz questions wrong, in which case the participant was told to shock them, and they would have to increase the voltage the more they got wrong, and the test subject on the other side of the wall was instructed to scream. Now, these screams were fake because the test subject was just pretending to feel the pain. But the participant didn't know that. They thought they were actually shocking people, and they would question the researcher. They would want to stop, but the researcher would urge them to keep going sometimes. Keep shocking them! Sometimes administering fatal levels of electricity, to the point where the test subject would stop screaming, so the participant thought they passed out, or worse. So why do I share these two stories with you? Well, because in the first study, participants wanted to stop, but they weren't allowed to. And the participants were not debriefed until years after the experiment was finished. There's a lack of informed consent because they didn't know what was involved in the study. And finally, there were demand characteristics where guards would act the way that the researcher wanted them to act, which ain't badass research to me. That's just bad research. In the second experiment, the Milgram experiment, participants were exposed to extreme emotional stress and inflicted insight, where a participant realizes a deep flaw about themselves. And despite fully informed consent, the experimenter didn't ensure the well-being of the participants. I'll leave you with one more example that was a bit more recent. In 2014, Facebook ran a massive psychological experiment on 700,000 users without them knowing. They manipulated people's news feeds to either contain more or less negative content and assess whether that affects people's emotions. Any lab could tell you that, oh duh, of course it does. Why do you need to run a study to find this? Just do some secondary research. Like, what was the point of this study? Anyway, these stories show the dark side of research and how it should not be done. We must learn to recognize what is bad research, not just protect ourselves, but our team, our company, and above all, our users. Let's learn how to keep our users safe and secure by conducting research responsibly. Let's start with the what and why in our next lesson. See you there.